I want to deeply apologize for this delay. I was hit with a rough cold that robbed me of my voice for a couple of weeks. Now I've largely recovered from that, but I'm on the road and lack some of my usual equipment, so this review is going to be a bit more duct taped together than usual. It's showdown time as our heroic Winchesters finally square off against their enemy in a desperate effort to get their father back before something untoward happens to him. Man, there's that deja vu again. This was one of those episodes that had a goal, did what needed to be done, and wasn't exceptional. The big problems with this episode actually were not with the actual literal hour itself. It had a lot of beats in common with Supernatural's episodes 121 Salvation, episode 122 Devil's Trap, and episode 716 Out with the Old. That's not even a real critique. I think the writer Robbie here did do a decent enough job putting his own unique stamp on it anyway. Again, this episode, in and of itself, not many complaints. My single biggest complaint is that we see this guy here, he's literally carrying around John, only to have Mary throw her entire weight into a drop kick at him later. Mary, who we can repeatedly see, is literally half of John's size. I mean, you know there's a reason combat sports have weight divisions, don't you? No, the biggest problem with this episode is a problem with the season as a whole. So, I've been talking with some other audience members, and one complaint I keep hearing is that this show is a prequel where we already know the ending. While I understand the sentiment, a counterpoint to that is that if knowing the ending ruined a story, then no one would ever watch a movie a second time. I mean, if there's an instance where you 100% know how something is going to end, it's a movie you've seen once before because the ending can't change. And yet we watch people go back and they rewatch favorite movies and TV shows just all the time. Why do people rewatch stuff? The simple fact of the matter is that there's no substitute for quality. Predictability only becomes an issue when there's nothing else to hold your interest. When you don't have engaging characters or a well executed plot to hold your attention, surprise and a mystery box can act as substitutes only for a very limited period of time. Once they have passed, the spell is broken. This is why I think so much of J.J. Abrams' writings will generate initial interest, but then have no staying power, lasting impact. The mystery box can get you the first time, but once you know what's in it, or even if it's empty, then there's no reason to revisit the story or remember it. Let me get personal for a moment and give a real world example. It has been well over a decade now since my grandparents had died, and it has taken us some time to go through all their effects. One Christmas, an aunt of mine revealed to us that she had discovered during all this a stashed box of my grandparents' old love letters written while my granddad was serving in the Navy. Now, obviously, we all know how their story ends. They got married, had several children who went on to have children of their own, who now have their own kids. Several of us, all sitting right there in that kitchen, were only there because of how the love story of those two people ended. Yet, their letters still held our attention for that entire Christmas day as we read them out loud. Why? Why were we invested in a story whose ending was known? Obviously, part of it is that we all deeply cared about the people involved, but it was also because these letters revealed to us a side we had never seen before. It's easy to forget that all of our ancestors were once silly teenagers too. that they were awkward and sweet and hopeful and unsure what the future would hold. It held our interest to think about their drama and imagine for a moment that had some tiny thing not worked out between them, none of us would have existed. We knew how the story ended, but we were captivated nonetheless because, again, it was a side of two people none of us had seen before. That's what the writers of the Winchesters just keep acting like they do not understand about what makes a prequel compelling. That since we already know the destination, everything about it is in the journey, and what makes the journey compelling is seeing something we hadn't before. In this case, a side of John and Mary that we never got to see in the original show. Let's take, for example, this scene of John finally kissing Mary. This might have had more impact had the season been setting up this moment beforehand. For an example, with Betty. Back when she was introduced, I said it was a problem for the show to end her love triangle so promptly. Yes, we know she doesn't end up with John, but the interesting part is how it fails. What makes it captivating is to make the audience ask, what if? What if Betty had married John? What drew them together in the first place? How different would their lives have been? How similar? What was the moment that pushed John to choose Mary over Betty? We're not shown or told any of that. It's just kind of a mumble, and they're done. This is largely why everyone keeps praising Drake's performances as John, because he's bringing something to the role we never saw from any other actor who's played that character. Conversely, Meg's performances as Mary are not as striking because it seems like she's just doing more of the same we've seen from other actresses in regards to this role. Now, let's examine the Akrita for another example of where the season failed the setup. Ever notice how they are a lot of telling and not showing? Like we're told this box is the only thing that can stop them. And I mean, I'm fine with that, but could we at least have a scene of shooting them with some guns? Say what you will about the Leviathan, and there were problems with their execution, but at least the mothership showed them dropping a car on one and the creature still coming back. Maybe try some bug spray on the Akrita? What if we threw him in a wood chipper? Getting the box to work would have more impact if we were shown our heroes trying things and failing over and over when fighting against the bugs. Otherwise, when the climax of the episode happens, the CGI critters look so lightweight, it seems like our heroes could hold them at bay with a large fan. Again and again and again, I want to make clear this episode was pretty good with payoffs. The problem I keep coming back to is that the episodes prior to it very poorly set up the payoffs. They wanted to have these big grand moments, but it doesn't work without a proper foundation or setup. It was nice to see Tom Welling as a young Samuel Campbell. It amuses me to think about Sam and Dean's grandpa being Superman. Gil McKinney did another decent job returning as Henry Winchester. Again, it makes me wish that on the mothership they had kept him around for a few episodes before he died off. He just brings something interesting to the show. Though I have so many questions now since he wasn't technically dead at the time they summoned him. He was still 30 odd some years from dying. I can allow some flexibility around this as the afterlife not being strictly linear in time, but it starts to raise a lot of questions that if you can summon the ghosts of people that are still technically alive. Everyone else did fine enough with acting. Ada and Millie are still our standout performances. I also like that in this episode there was more investigation and problem solving. with even Millie coming through with a creative solution. So I'm giving this episode 4 out of 5 salt shells. It does so much that I want and expect from a supernatural show, but again, had the previous season done a better job setting things up and arranging the characters and story beats, this would have hit a 5 shell score easy. Unfortunately, they let it down, so the payoff lacked the punch that it could have had. Until next time, when the show returns in January, I hope you've had a good holiday, and I'll catch you all next time when the show returns.